Well, good afternoon, everyone, and that's good afternoon to everybody in Federation Hall and everybody out in Zoom land. If you haven't met me before, I'm David Sequeira, and I'm the director of the Fiona and Sydney Meyer Gallery, and I'm also the person that gets the privilege of organising the Art Forum speaker series here at the VCA. And before I introduce our guest speaker, I invite you to ground yourself in the location that you're in and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where you're located. For us, it's the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And to consider that long before the VCA or the University of Melbourne was thought of, that the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people practiced song and dance. They made paintings and sculptures, they shared stories, they practiced healing on this land. And it really is with joy and honour that we get to acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. It's really great for me to introduce our guest speaker today. Dr. Melentie Pandilovski is a phenomenologist, an art theorist, an art historian and curator. His research, which includes over 200 curated exhibitions and numerous publications, examines the links between art, culture, science and technology. His recent roles include Director of Experimenta Media Arts in Melbourne, Director of Riddoch Art Gallery in Mount Gambier, Director of Video Pool Media Arts Centre in Winnipeg, Canada, Director of the Visual Cultural Research Centre Euro-Balkan Institute in Skopje, Macedonia, Director of Experimental Art Foundation in Adelaide, and the Contemporary Arts Centre in Skopje, Macedonia. Wherever you are in Zoom land or in Federation Hall, please make Melentie very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you also to VCA for inviting me to talk here. I think it's my third time in this room. I mean, the previous iterations included the conference a few years ago on curation that Brad Buckley and John Economos organized. And then before that, the trans imaging conference that Paul Thomas organized, I think back in 2009. So tonight I will speak more about my theoretical perspectives on whatever is happening to us as a society. And I'll just show a few projects, but those projects will more or less support the theory behind. Yeah, I'll start first by just saying that visually based technologies, which I understand to be image processing, video, VR, AR technologies, teamed up with AI, assist us in witnessing very vast changes appearing in our understanding of the world via the intentional coupling of virtual contents and active streams of sensations in cultural and communal conditionings. By the end of this, well, actually the beginning of the third decade of the 21st century, that went fast. So, and interestingly enough, we just talked about it previously, video technologies were once considered to be peripheral and even subcultural. I remember the times when we couldn't get video art into the museums. And I think the first time when new media was kind of shown on a grand scale was for Catherine David's Documenta back in, when was it, 1997. So our understanding of space, our understanding of time has fundamentally changed with the digitalized satellite navigation, the newly established reliance on social media, has turned this simultaneously into a need, a thrill, and shackles for most humans. The clandestine use of social media in political campaigns has proven to be highly effective, divisive, and for that, I think I'll show the first slide, which, and many of you will recognize this person. Of course, it is Henri Bergson. And he's actually quite important in whatever is happening to us today, in whatever we're understanding to be happening to us. So These collaborative distributed techno-scientific networks have pushed the boundaries of the achievable and have shed new light on the relation that is being established between humans and technology, providing an account of everyday technology relations in a manner that can facilitate only considerations of the social and ethical implications of information technology. Our ability to code life into symbols and being able to interpret these symbols has changed the very notion of what we understand as life. With British physicist Stephen Hawking arguing that computer viruses should be considered as life forms, since they submit to all standard definitions of life. And indeed, biotechnology, and in particular the work with DNA, allows us to alter hereditary characteristics. This is even further advanced with bioinformatics and nanotechnology, where we can rebuild on an atomic level and thus shape biological life forms. The globally expanded citadel, in some context titled as a smart city, is in a state of a permanent reinvention in which new technologies of spatiality result in planned as well as in unexpected products and media conditioning of novel communitarian spaces. The narratives of artists, game designers, analysts of cultural data, digital humanists, architects, blend with the constructs of data scientists and bioanalysts, navigating through the maze of the ever-evolving construction of the computational media apparatus. Science and philosophy share motives, metaphors, and models with arts. Historically, we know that these sorts of parallelisms between arts and sciences go a long way back and can be traced in our modern times in the well-known cases such as Picasso and Braque coming up with the concept of cubism and Einstein with the concept of relativity in around the same period. The influence of Henri Poincaré's writing, Science and Hypothesis, on the artists of the age, and especially the chapters on origins of geometry, seem to tell us that the origins of cubism are not completely rooted in the arts. Now, this has been thoroughly researched by Arthur I. Miller in Insights of Genius, Imagery and Creativity in Science and Art. Basically, it is all about how to interpret the unseen world that goes beyond conventional constraints of visual imagery and language to dramatically transform the concepts of visual imagery. However, and this first image of Henri Bergson, I've put in there because it's perhaps his influence on the development of both arts and sciences that is the most crucial element. In Matter and Memory, text of 1896, he anticipated the quantum conception of matter, that particles have a holistic nature, that matter is not substantial, and that the movement and position of a body cannot be determined simultaneously, and that physical processes do not obey a strict necessity. He drew these conclusions simply from reflecting about the relationship between mind and matter. At the same time, his influence in Cubist aesthetics and other modernist movements is second to none and cannot be overstated. So the title of my presentation today is comes actually from Henri Bergson, that he claimed that we have to change our way of thinking when facing new objects. Being aware of the difficulty in doing so, he added the idea that for a new object, we might have to create a new concept, perhaps a new way of thinking, is deeply repugnant to us. I want to go back to a project that curated by British artist Lee Cox. Lee Cox, in his work, Teleportation Experiment, which I curated for the Experimental Art Foundation back in 2004, I think, enters a discourse which has been popular among philosophers, scientists, sci-fi writers, and the general public. The basic idea taken by Lee Cox is that of travel through time and space travel in which one's body is dissolved into its subatomic form of pure information and reassembled at its destination. Important issues that seem to surface are questions of the understanding of time and space, reality and fiction, as well as of visual imagery and language. Scientists such as Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen have come up with a working theory of quantum teleportation. The famous experiments such as the Philadelphia experiment and the role of Nikola Tesla have sparked the imagination of generations. Art, especially the moving image, has followed a history of involvement with teleportation, and here we can remember not only Star Trek, but also Cronenberg's The Fly, The Matrix, etc. Their common denominator is that they all depict a certain concept of teleportation, which is only possible if machines are being used. However, Lee Cox is contrasting this, does not use any equipment. His teleportation, and I must add that Lee Cox is a firm believer in teleportation and believes that this will happen during our lifetimes. I think that helps. So his concept of teleportation is accomplished without visible use of technology, but by using psychic powers. Lee Cox, the director, has assigned Lee Cox, the actor, to present us the concept of teleportation, depicting various dramatic changes endured by the body before disappearing and subsequently reappearing on another wall in the gallery. That's how he reappears. So how is this possible? I mean, he tackles more directly this concept of teleportation also because he follows some sort of oral thought which has come to us from the ancient Greeks. For those of you that know Plato's writings about Socrates, where he speaks to Plato and they discuss a perfect copy and if a perfect copy is possible and how this perfect copy can be done if somebody would copy not only the outside attributes but also the inside attributes of a human being. And it's a really interesting way of thinking, which we have, I think, completely neglected in the past several centuries. But this claim is also supported by quantum physicists who tell us that quantum teleportation doesn't engage in repositioning the object in a different location, but in replicating the original to a different place. It basically copies the original. There is a sad twist, though, with this theory, is that it also considers the destruction of the original. So is it really Lee Cox himself being transformed to a different location, or is it just a perfect copy of Lee Cox, which is doing that? How are we gonna know? It's something that has intrigued me and has intrigued, of course, Lee Cox, and I've presented this quite a few times, and I think we're nowhere closer to discovering whether this in practice will be possible. But Lee Cox is adamant that we'll be able to do that soon. So we're building a global apparatus, and as with any apparatus, we must not forget the warnings of Czech-born, Sao Paulo-based for most of his life, and then based in France, media thinker Willem Fluster, who claimed that apparatuses are generally based on technical and political programs, which are highly ideological and always biased, reminding us of the cost associated with this. For Fluster, the nature of media determines the nature of society. He writes with David Carson in the Book of Probes, once a new technology comes into the social milieu, it cannot cease to permeate that milieu until every institution is saturated. The sensory unfolding and recurrent media flux resulting from our global immersion into this generates novel forms of spatiality and expanded meaning of space as well as time. as these video-related technologies are rapidly changing ways of our communicating and living, never before experienced by previous generations, with a myriad of benefits, as well as by psychiatric disorders, examples of which include OCD, ADHD, and various forms of narcissism manifested via overuse of technology. Sensing what was to follow many decades later, Mcloone, and I think I might have Mcloone here. Okay, so this is Mcloone. Operating on three analytical levels at once, the perceptual, the historical, and the analogical, prophesizes that video-related technologies must produce a form of psychological death for all mankind by separating it permanently from the natural order, the book of nature, through narcissist-like self-involvement, a conclusion reached by him on the mentioned three levels. We can title the totality of these experiences as the creation of a global techno-scientific apparatus. His belief of three technological innovations, so those are the innovation of phonetic alphabet, the introduction of the movable type, and the invention of the telegraph, bears high resembling to Fluster, who believes in the pendulum swing that allows the linear text type culture to be pushed into the background by the technical image, this time the photograph, thus creating basis for a philosophic and functional shift of consciousness, as the logic of the alphabet, which directed the thinking or linear numerical form of the or historical consciousness for a long period of time, is already overcome by the mathematical logic of the technical image. So Mcloone's trinity of visual space, acoustic space, and the tetrad certainly imposes itself holistically. Visual space is the mind space of civilization, proceeding from the last 4 millennia of linearity, relying heavily on the left quantitative hemisphere of the brain. Acoustic space, according to Mcloone, is the projection of the right hemisphere based on qualitative thinking, holistic, multi-centered rather than monocentric. Simultaneous understanding of both systems is necessary for our world's survival, as that is what enables integrated awareness. So Mcloone said in the medium is the message, that the medium is the message. To which Derek Kierkegaard adds that not only the medium, but also the context is the message. This is Marshall Mcloone's house in Winnipeg. While I was running a video pool, we organized a conference in regard to the 100th anniversary of Mcloone's birth. And then it also coincided with 20 years from Willem Fluster's death. So the big event, which included a conference, workshops, and exhibitions happened around that time. Unfortunately, I don't have any more of these books on Mcloone and Fluster, but I'm sure if you contact Video Pool, they'll be able to send you a copy. So this is Mcloone's trinity of visual space, acoustic space, and the tetrad. Now the tetrad is actually the 4 laws of media, and Mcloone didn't come to this by himself, but together with his son, Eric Mcloone. And basically it's about enhancement, obsolescence, retrieval, and reversal. And here I have a little chart which explains a little bit the tetrad. So it becomes crucial for the understanding of the cultural shift, current cultural shift between the visual and the acoustic space. According to Mcloone, the tetrad is a means of focusing awareness of very hidden and unobserved qualities in culture and technology. It's a dynamic tool describing situations that are in process and analyzing the patterns or of effects that differ technological production. The 4 laws of media exist simultaneously and were not intended to be considered in a chronological order. Mcloone rather phrased them as questions with which to consider any artifact. So what does it enhance? What does it make obsolete? What does it retrieve that has been obsolesced earlier? And what does it flip into when pushed to the extremes? So according to Mcloone, if we use the tetrad, we are able to analyze any new technology, and I think this is quite useful for students. So that's why I'm presenting it now. Enhancement is the amplification of effects within focusing on the practical, involving the creation of vortices of power and presenting a solution to previous problems. Retrieval as the recovery of values and insight which were previously eroded, involve the transition of ground to figure. Obsolescence, of course, as the erosion of formerly significant artifact, reverses the transition above, causing a transition to figure to ground, in which some previously important phenomenon is moved to periphery, and reversal as a reverse of enhancement, the unexpected dissatisfactions. On the other hand, Mcloone reaches this dramatic conclusion operating on three levels at once. As I mentioned before, about the video-related technologies producing a form of psychological death for mankind. However, any diagnosis of these situations must include the socio-political moment of a global crisis through which we're living, have been for the past few decades, the overlap of the techno-scientific sphere and social networking, the creation of a common, instantaneously created social space, Willem Flusser's recognition of an apparatus operandi complex being the motivating force behind all contemporary and social change, suggests that the structure of the apparatus is never politically and aesthetically neutral. For Mcloone, cause and effect become simultaneous to human awareness, conferring once more a mythical dimension to consciousness. For myth is a mode of perceiving and stating causes and effects at the same time. When man is overwhelmed by information, he resorts to myth. Therefore, Mcloone says that all technology becomes part of the ritual that the tribe desperately strives to keep stabilized and permanent. Some of you will recognize this is Natalie Yeremienko's or Jeremijenko's, depending where you live, that's how you pronounce it, is the Feral Dog Project. These are toxin-sniffing robotic dogs. I curated this for the Toxicity Project in plugin ICA. They're really phenomenal. She designed them and programmed them with her students. Really they sniff, they growl if they come close to environmental toxins. So quite an amazing work. Then I thought that, you know, throughout my career as a curator, but also as let's say, media thinker, I have also referred to Heidegger, who defines the essence of modern technology as Gestalt or in framing. Opposed to that, Albert Borgman has said that the framed position takes up free position by saying that the modern technology frames the world for us as devices. The devices de-world our relationship with things by disconnecting us from the full actuality of things. So Heidegger's concept of enframing and Borgman's device mood can be deciphered today by using Eugene Thacker's trinity of encoding, recoding and decoding. I really like, I'll show you this one. This is Joe Davis's work called Malus Ecclesia. Joe Davis took part in the genetic sequencing of the ancestor of modern apples, the wild crab apple Malus sieversii. With colleagues at the Harvard University, he's now attempting to create an apple strain that contains the most used information of the English language in Wikipedia. So really, the malus ecclesia is refers to Eden, the apple of Adam and Eve. Presents an apple tissue culture that contains a quote from the oldest known account of the tree and the serpent. So Joe, in his thinking, points out the society is struggling to integrate this new knowledge in life sciences into older frameworks and scaffolding that support religious, legal, corporate, and other social economic structures will inevitably have to be reconfigured. Simultaneous notions of the biological stock being property and information have been referred to by numerous artists, having the traits of materiality and immateriality existing as deployments of life, which are being shifted from body to body, body to code, and code to body. And what better project is there to present in regard to this but Eduardo Katz's Genesis? I think you probably all know this project. It's back from 1999. I've curated it once at the Experimental Art Foundation. Takes a lot of energy to keep the project alive. Basically, he's taken the Genesis, the first few sentences, which say that, let man have dominion over the fish, etc., etc. And he takes this sentence in the English language, translates it into DNA code, the DNA code into Morse code. No, sorry, of course, the other way around, the English language into Morse code, and the Morse code into DNA. And then the public, so that's placed in a petri dish, and then in this glass cabinet in the middle of a room. The public, by turning on and off UV light, changes the sequence, and then it affects it. And then after 5 weeks of doing this, Eduardo does the reversible process. So he transfers the DNA code back to Morse and the Morse back to English. And then the bacteria gives us an answer of what it thinks to this anthropocentric sentence. The bacteria doesn't agree. Of course, Thomas Metzinger draws the attention to the fact that we do not know what the psychological consequences of the use of these technologies, such as VR, are, and points to the risks of depersonalization after extended immersion in virtual environments, as well as to the need to study its long-term effects. Sometimes artists will not follow this, and so this is magnetic, something I call magnetic baptism. It's a kind of collaborative project between myself for this part and the Canadian Seattle-based artist called Ted Hebert. We did this project at the Plug-in Institute in Winnipeg. So basically, these are magnets, and these the magnets are of various sizes, and he just places them on his head. We have no clue. We do not know what these magnets are doing to his brain. He doesn't know, but nevertheless, he was willing to take the risk. So, yeah, one more for the artist. It's also a very, wonderful lyrical project, but very risky. So connecting to conscious experience produced by biological nervous systems, he says that general public will gradually acquire a new and intuitive understanding of what their very own conscious experience really is, and what it always has been. So in the case of VR, it's a representation of possible worlds and possible selves, with the aim of making them appear as real as possible, ideally by creating a subjective sense of presence in the user. Finnish philosopher Antti Revonsuo points out to how conscious experience exactly is a virtual model of the world, a dynamic internal simulation, which in standard simulations cannot be experienced as a virtual model because it is phenomenally transparent. We look through it as if we were in direct and immediate contact with reality. So what is historically new and what creates not only novel psychological risks, but also entirely new ethical and legal dimensions is that one virtual reality gets even more deeply embedded into another virtual reality. The conscious mind of human beings, which has evolved under very specific conditions and over millions of years, now gets causally coupled and informationally woven into technical systems for representing possible realities. You might know this work. So this is, of course, the third year, Stellark and a fan. It's one of the seminal works of the 21st century. It has had various iterations. Stellark can actually show us the work as he is here in the public. It's a quite loved work, as we can see. I mean, I remember the quartet scale year and the project he did back with the tissue arts and culture and symbiotica. But then all the other iterations and how we got to this. Of course, that's another presentation, but I just thought I wanted to show it as one of the seminal pieces together with Genesis that signifies this 21st century. So increasingly consciousness is not only culturally and socially embedded, but also shaped by a specific technological niche that over time quickly acquires rapid autonomous dynamics and even new properties. This creates a complex convolution, a nested form of information flow in which the biological mind and its technological niche influence each other in ways we are just beginning to understand. This is the wine dress. I thought I wanted to end on this note about sparkling couture. I mean, this is the first iteration of the wine dress. So Gary Cass and Donna Franklin presented this for a show I curated back at the Experimental Art Foundation in 2009 called BioArt Revisited. The entire gallery actually smelled like vinegar for a long time. This was produced, this was one of the first dresses which were done. Gary found a way about how to produce these dresses, which really come from scooping, really like a foam of whatever is settled on top of a barrel of wine. And then if you scoop this, it becomes a bit of a sculptural material, and then you can work with it. But the importance is actually deeper. And then in 2017, in Gambier, I presented the sparkling couture dress. So it's the idea behind this is that it takes 8,000 liters of water to produce a single pair of jeans. Gary Cass, scientist, now a businessman in Sweden, UWA alumnus, developed this sustainable alternative to cotton. Basically, he's calling it nanolose, and it's a dress made from bacterial fermentation of sparkling wine, fashioned from this nanolose microbial cellulose. And the current global requirement for textile fibers is imposing a massive negative impact, as we know, on Earth's environment. So these dresses became quite popular. The material itself is quite popular. Gary and Donna got invited and presented these dresses for the Melbourne Cup, also for Milan Fashion Fair, etc. So something which was quite, you know, interestingly started as an artistic project by an artist and another person who was artist, scientist, technician, ended up as high industry. And really, just art never stops astonishing me. And I think that's the end of my presentation.
Thanks so much, Melentie. We've got some time for questions. I'm wondering if anyone has a question. Oh, I've got a question.
Sure.
And the question is, you described yourself as a phenomenologist. And I wonder if you could tell us what, like in your words, because that word, phenomenology is just a, if you Google that word, it's just like pages and pages and pages comes up. But I wonder if you could tell us what you mean when you describe yourself as a phenomenologist and perhaps connect that with the work that you do.
Yeah, well, I mean, phenomenology has been around, of course, since Kant, who spoke about phenomena, but more seriously as a discipline within philosophy. Started really with the research of Edmund Husserl, and then afterwards Martin Heidegger. And we've had hundreds of philosophers who define themselves as phenomenologists. I have recently realized that I'm not really a phenomenologist. I'm probably more of a post-phenomenologist, but it's too late to change that. I've declared myself as a phenomenologist everywhere. And I think of myself as a post-phenomenologist because I believe that, and I believe in something that not all phenomenologists believe. So what I believe in is that society and technology co-constitute each other. So there is no way how technology can go ahead of community, or community go ahead of technology. They always go hand in hand. And that's, if anything else, is a post-phenomenological position. So that's why I would like to redefine myself as a post-phenomenologist. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anyone else with a question? Yeah, please, Stephen.
I'm curious just on the matter of phenomenology, you obviously see a connection between the technologies and our perception. I'm wondering what you're proposing, I suppose, that one can't get ahead of the other. And is that because the technology is indeed embedded in our phenomenology anyway? Like we wouldn't invent a technology that we couldn't utilize as a device to perceive. But inevitably there's a kind of anthropomorphism there in the way that we're extending our senses and potential devices for perception, but we're always limited.
Well, thanks for that. It's a good question, actually. Even the ancient Greeks, or the ancient world, didn't differentiate between art and technology, right? Techne is the same word used for art as it was for any craft, as it was for any technology. So really, we do not differentiate. It is within us. It is almost impossible to escape it. Yeah, so in that sense, I agree with that.
I was pleased with references to Mcloone, because I think he's vastly underrated as a kind of proponent of a lot of the developments and thinking about technology, and talking about how technology and the body co-constitute each other. He has another statement that technology is the external organs of the body. So we've sort of evolved as soft biological bodies with internal organs, but in this technological terrain that we now inhabit, it's necessary to engineer additional external organs to better interface with the world. So I kind of like that very much, and I think is and Fluster, of course, Mcloone and Fluster should be always a reference to when talking about anything to do with technology.
Yeah, he was also a kind of an archangel for art, just by saying that art is an early distance warning system, telling society what's yet to happen to it. And we should always have that in mind, you know, like art as the oracle, which we sometimes tend to forget. That art does have this ability, that it's now a substitution for religion. And I do agree about I mean, Mcloone was speaking about the neural system and how it's actually switching. So from something which was really turned towards the inside, now we're turned towards the outside, right? And we do need devices for that.
Is there anyone else who'd like to? Yeah, please, Kieran.
I don't know much about theory. Just trying to think of this through. But like the system where like artificial intelligence is being developed, and the possibility that artificial intelligence is able to develop its own technologies for its own function, and that position which then splits away from that text, our idea of what community might be. Centers around ourselves.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Actually, nowadays it has developed in such a different facets that it's almost impossible to follow all that. I remember when Marvin Minsky was speaking about artificial intelligence, he was one of the prophets, right? And he was at the same time like a key theorist and musician, together with John Cage. They had this idea about artificial intelligence, and it was so lyrical, it was so poetic, and I feel that we're losing that. I fear it's becoming very technical, but that we do as a human beings, we need to somehow put it back to like give it a human dimension so that we can actually understand it. And I do fear that it's getting ahead of us, where we cannot actually fully grasp it.
I think with that, just following on from Karen's question there, artificial intelligence that we're producing is incredibly functional. Like its intent is essentially to be our new slaves. But we've got the anxiety that we've always had towards slaves, that they may rise up against us.
It's a fair point. Yeah, but I do agree. A lot of it is mercantile. A lot of it is based on business gains. A lot of it is based on military research. And I do remember I was curating some VR. Stellar, you mentioned VR yesterday. Yeah, the virtual reality modeling language, which preceded the Second Life, by the way. So I was curating some exhibitions in Germany and America, and then I kind of realized that I'm in the middle of a military naval base in the U.S. So it was Monterey, and that's where the biggest Pacific base is. And the reason for that is they needed the artists to give it a bit of a human touch. There were thousands of these programmers around, and they were all trying to learn the code. It was quite fascinating, actually, that, the whole idea was, we thought it was all about, the future and arts and community. They thought about how they can send models of submarines from this Pacific base to Washington, D.C. into rooms like this, because in a small submarine, you cannot have all the plumbers and electricians. So, and they cannot argue about where to have the wires and where to have the pipes going and all that. But if you're able to use virtual reality and send it via the networks, and by then we had the internet, that was back in 1999, 2000, then you could actually have setting like this. And then they can actually see these models and come up with solutions. But basically, it was the American Navy that was paying for that. I was quite surprised, but I shouldn't have been.
If there's nothing else, just really thank you, Melentie, for taking the time to be with us. And, it's really interesting to kind of do a deep dive with you into this world. So wherever you are, please thank our speaker.